Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast, your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hive's protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Hey, Kim. Well, I'm looking forward to this podcast. I'm kind of techie in some ways. I enjoy...
Kind of. Come on.
Well, I lean to the digital side, all right? So, and so the series of articles that you've been running in Gleanings and Bee Culture. I'm sorry, I'm the old school, Gleanings and Bee Culture, and about the electronic hive and the developments in the last few years and the technology that's running out. I find it really fascinating. And today's guest, Rich Morris from Broodminder, is going to be fun. His product, Broodminder, is out in the market and in a lot of hives across the country.
Yeah, this is the third one of these that we've done, talking to one of these electronic people, and the picture certainly is broadening, and our horizon is expanding. And I got to tell you, if you're a beekeeper today, you better start listening, because this is the future. So this is one of the pieces of the future. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, me too. Hey, before we get going on with today's topic, last week when I was in Ohio, I talked to you about the problems I was having with queens, and I was having a queen that just wouldn't get past 4 frames, and finally I requeened her, and when I got back from Ohio, checked on her, and she's doing really good, so I'm really happy about that. How about you? I know you've had some challenges with queens.
Well, we had packages this spring, and 3 packages, and by the middle of June, I'd gone through 9 queens in those 3 packages.
In 3 packages, 9 queens.
Yeah, 9 queens. Some of them I bought, some of them I let them raise, some of them I don't know where they came from. They finally settled down here the middle of July, and now I've got 3 good, strong queens, and I'm sure that there's probably second generation that have gone out to mate.
Yep.
Poorly mated. We've had the same problems everybody else has: too much rain, not enough mating time. But it quit raining. The queens got mated. I got brood. I got colonies. I may make it through the winter this year.
Good. Just in time to have them swarm. If only there was a... Go ahead.
I need a machine to tell me when that's going to happen.
I was going to say, if only there was a way to know what's going on inside your hive. Well, that brings us to today's guest, Rich Morris of Broodminder. Broodminder is a product that's several products that work together to give beekeepers an opportunity to see, to hear, and learn what's actually going on inside their hives. So we've invited Rich on today's podcast episode to give us some background, some information on Broodminder and what they can do. So let's get him on Zoom right now.
Okay.
Hey, Rich. Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great today.
Good to talk to you again, Rich.
Yeah, likewise. My bees are out flying, and life is good.
What's the weather in Wisconsin this time of year?
Well, this time of year, it's been beautiful the last couple of days and going to get hot again. We had an awful spring, just like a lot of the Midwest here, that it just rained and rained and rained and cold until the second week of June, and then it turned 95 degrees.
Oh, I've got family up in northern Wisconsin. Last weekend they went through, well, some were calling it a tornado, some were calling it almost a tornado, but they've experienced the harder side of the weather you've got up there.
Well, I'm a Hoosier by birth and very familiar with the tornadoes and and all that. Really pretty pleasant up here.
So, Rich, we've invited you to the podcast to talk about electronic hive monitoring, and since you're the head of Broodminder, I wanted to invite you to the show and give you an opportunity to talk about your perspective of the topic. Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself and your beekeeping experience and what started you thinking about creating Broodminder?
Sure. I've been keeping bees about 15 years when I moved out to the country, and my family's a farm family, and it just seemed like something that I ought to be doing. And I ran a consultancy for about 5 years prior to starting Broodminder up. And when I left that, decided that we've been talking about how people should make products, and the perfect thing for me to do was start up Broodminder, because I'm an electrical engineer, system engineer by training, and the prospect that we have this part of agriculture that has been largely untouched by technology, just it felt like it was rife for something to happen, especially with the peril of bees and all of that going on. I just felt we could know more, if we start monitoring some things.
Cool. So tell us how Broodminder got started.
Like I said, Broodminder started about 4 years ago. I did a crowdfunding. Mostly I wanted to know when my bees died during the winter. I'm in Wisconsin, and you shut them up October or November, and then you go out in March and see if you got any bees left. In between, we'd wrap on the side and listen to them and see everything. But it just drove me crazy not knowing even that simple thing, that they died in November, or they died in February, or they died in March, because each timing makes a difference in what you're going to do the next year. Mm-hmm. So it just started with that idea that we have a temperature and humidity sensor that we put in the hive. I did a crowdfunding for that, and lo and behold, there were about 500 other people who were interested in playing along with us. And along the way, Dave Strickler and Theo Hartman wrote to me and said, "Hey, we are very interested in this, and we're doing some of this ourselves. How about we band together and do it together?" So, that became my association with them. And then along with some people that I'd worked with at the consultancy, we had 5 or 6 people who were, sort of dedicated to forming this product and making it a true consumer product. One of the things that struck me when I started was everything out there was basically by engineers for engineers. So we wanted to amass this huge pile of data, and to do that, we really had to target as our typical user, a beekeeper, a gardener, someone like my mom. So we didn't want them to get overwhelmed by the technology. We wanted all of these people to, again, play along and collect this data with us.
You definitely have made it accessible for the average person, and it's not daunting actually at all. I'll be happy to say that I went out and this summer I'd purchased the Broodminder's Citizen Science Kit. Do I have that name right? The Citizen.
That's right.
Yeah, Citizen Scientist Kit, and it's simple to install, simple to set up, and simple to start watching. So describe the initial setup of a Broodminder hive.
Okay, so as we started, like I said, we started with the temperature and humidity. And after starting to go to the meetings, ABF and EAS and all those, very quickly, everyone said, well, this is nice, but what about weight? I really want to see weight. I want to see honey. I want to see all that. So we designed a scale to go along with the temperature, humidity. And we also discovered along the way that there were all this large group of people who want to help, quote unquote, save the bees. And we thought, okay, here is an opportunity to collect data with backyard people who aren't moving their hives and are interested in adding to the general knowledge of bees. So we made this citizen science kit that, like you said, you bought. And basically what that amounts to is a scale that goes under the hive and it measures temperature and weight, a temperature humidity sensor that goes in the hive above one of the brood nests, and a temperature only device which goes over the other. Typically people have two brood boxes, and so we put one over each of those. So all together that monitors the temperature, humidity, and the weight of the hive. Then those devices collect data once an hour, and we come up with our app and harvest that data, and it brings back all the data since the person was there the last time. And then after that data is harvested, we say, do you want to send this to the cloud? And we agree that we will store that data for free by zip code only, as long as you agree that it's public domain, because we want to provide this data to the researchers and scientists out there who are interested in big data.
That when you look at, and we'll provide these links in the show notes, but when you look at the map across the United States and all the hives that are being monitored, and that's under your beecounted.org map, is that correct? Beecounted.org. That's pretty exciting that you could go and click on any of those bees on that map to see what's happening across the United States.
Yeah, my background was in osteoporosis and medical ultrasound. And one of the things that during my 15 years at GE Lunar that we found out was that when you start looking at population data, it becomes really powerful, because we all know that our beehives, you can have a super duper hive right next to, a average hive right next to a, awful hive. So they vary so much that if you just look at a small group of hives, you can draw the wrong conclusions based on, your firsthand knowledge, but it's not statistically significant. So, there again, we wanted to get this large pile of data. And then when you look at that, all the outliers start to fall away, and you're left with the mean, with the average of that. And that's where the real power we feel is. And now that we've shipped about 13,000 devices, and we've got about 150 million data points, wow, it really starts to get exciting for us, because as we look at this, we can look at when brood rearing starts, when honey flow begins. Wayne Asilas, I'm sure Kim's very familiar with, started this with the honeybee.net with the NASA group. What was it, 15 years ago or so, weighing hives. And, talking with Wayne, he said, he realized all of a sudden that weight correlates completely 100% with climate, and that makes sense, because it's when things bloom, right, that we get our nectar flow and we see that weight increase. So, we feel there's a tremendous opportunity for us to know more about our bees as well as more about our environment.
So are you able to, confession here, sold me one of the units several years ago, and it's still in the package. So I'm coming at this from a non-user perspective, which probably actually has an advantage, because I'm asking some of the questions that other people are going to be asking here. And the first question I see, I'm a plant person. So the first question I'm looking at is, I'm looking at weight data in my backyard, or weight data in the northern half of Wisconsin or the northern third of Ohio. And I'm looking at growing degree days, and I'm looking at inches of rain, and I'm looking at all sorts of corollaries here. The question comes up, are you beginning to be able to predict what's going to happen by looking, okay, I've got this much weight gain, we've got this many growing degree days, get your supers on, because in 3 days you're going to hit a bonanza?
I think that is not far away at this point. I'll mention another association that we have with a company in France called Melisphera. And Lorenzo Pons and his group, they've gotten some funding from the government of France. And they decided quickly that they couldn't develop the instrumentation, but they are doing exactly that. They're taking the data that we're gathering from all these and from their clientele in France. And, they are purely looking at data and also purely looking at the user experience for a beekeeper. We, as a technical company, still have this problem that we've got to worry about data and integrity and all those sorts of things. It's got to be right, but that doesn't let us focus on the user quite as much. Once Lorenzo and his group, they are focused completely on the beekeeper experience. And one of the things we'll be introducing at Appomondia, actually, is this integration with Melisphera. And they have things like a database of all the plants. And you can say, okay, I have dandelions, I have locust trees, I have these sorts of things. And then when you see the honey flow, it takes that and you can also, when it's expected to bloom, but then you can tweak it to when it actually does. And what it'll stratify your weight chart into what it believes the different sources are.
Okay, you've convinced me. I'm going to have to dig this thing out when I get home tonight.
Well, Jim too has one, and he only kept it for a year and a half before he put it in. So
we were at Jim 2's bee yard yesterday doing a Kim and Jim show, and he showed me the device.
Okay, good.
And I said, okay, how long did you have that? And he said, too long. So he and I are kind of on the same page there. But take this another step now. I looked at this, and your scale, a flat bar essentially, sits underneath the front of the hive.
Right.
And I'm going back to how I learned how to weigh a hive with a spring scale. You lift the front, you lift the back, you put the two numbers together, and you've got about the weight of the hive. If your scale is sitting under just the front, how does that work?
Well, it's not as accurate, and we admit that right away. If the bees put the center of mass right in the middle of the hive, it's perfect. But they don't always cooperate. So we
have to give them instructions. Yeah, okay.
we know that there's an accuracy error. But when we went to ABF the first time and said, okay, would you rather pay $250 for a full hive scale or $150 for half a hive scale? You still will see the 5 gram increments, but you won't know if it might be 5 kilograms off. And what we decided was what people really want to see is the flow on. Is the consumption rate big or small? And that the precision is good and the sensitivity is good, but the accuracy is off. And that's the compromise but it makes it cheaper to ship. It makes it cheaper to build. It makes it cheaper for all that. And above everything else, beekeepers are cheap.
Well, as a user's tool, I can see the value right now. I mean, that makes perfect sense. I don't need it to the gram. I just need it to the moment.
Right.
And that makes perfect sense. So,
well, you have the ability to fine tune the scale. I mean, it's not that it's horribly off or anything. If you, let's say, if you're really technically or geeky inclined, like some people are, you have the instructions for increasing the accuracy and also to establish a tare, if that's right, the TARE and determine the accuracy of the scale. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And thank you for pointing that out. That we calibrate the scales here with fixed weights at 0, 25, 50, and 75 pounds. We have a computerized system that we built that lowers it. And so we know the scale itself and the force sensors are accurate. We don't know if the beehive is set up right and those sorts of things. The other thing we can do, so you can apply, calibration factors for that. Actually, we have 100 devices at the University of Wisconsin this summer. And what Hannah Gainsday, Dr. Hannah Gainsday, has done is she's putting 2 of them under the hive, and we're adding those together. So she's getting the full hive weight because she didn't want the accuracy, and she did, like her devices and all that. So, there's a couple of ways to skin that cat. And, we want to make it accessible for people, so we chose the route.
Sure.
We did.
Well, I see that as excuse me, as a useful route, and for what I would be using it for, exactly what I need it for. However, I'm going to be honest. I'm kind of a biologist, but I'm not a genius by any stretch of the imagination. But I can see where weight has a value from a beekeeper's perspective, and I can see where temperature has a value from having a feel for brood rearing inside the colony, more brood, warmer temperature. Are you seeing the same sort of predictability or measurability looking at humidity?
It's certainly not as obvious. There are some folks out there who are very concerned about humidity. About a year ago, we redesigned our temperature humidity device into a third product, which was temperature only, so that we could cut the cost. And people keep buying the temperature humidity, because even though it's twice as much. The jury's still out. I don't know what it's going to tell us. We see basically that in a healthy, strong hive, they will regulate between 50 and 75% relative humidity. We all know that 100% in the winter is bad, because it'll rain on your bees. There's some people out there who are micro-regulating humidity because they feel that's going to improve their brood or something like that. But, we make no claims about that because, frankly, we don't know till, the data tells us something. One other interesting thing we did this summer with temperature is that we are now releasing a firmware update for our temperature devices in about 2 months that detects swarms.
Really?
Yeah.
How does that work?
So once you put your device in and are trying to understand what it's telling you, it makes you think differently about your bees. And basically, we know that before a swarm, what happens? You're taking mostly not foragers, but these bees who have never flown before, they have to warm up their flight muscles, right? And so there's about a 4-degree Fahrenheit bump in temperature 20 minutes before a swarm. Now, it's not predicting it 2 weeks out like we all wish, but we feel there's value in just knowing that they did swarm, because the other thing Theo has seen in his apiary is there's a lot more action than he even realized. That once we see this bump, then instead of saving data once every hour, we save data the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after at 1 minute increments. So we have a nice, smooth increment. And it also generates an alert that says, hey, there was a swarm. Now, Theo also saw action in one of his hives about 10 days later, and there was no swarm, but he's wondering if it was like when the virgin queen left and came back, or for some reason the bees are getting excited and their temperature's going up. We also see temperature bumps like when they're being robbed. We've seen that before. And you just think, well, okay, it's temperature. So if their metabolism jumps, you're going to see something else. The brood rearing's very clear, but there's these other signatures that we're, trying to figure out.
What about weight on a swarm? Do you see a weight trough right after a swarm?
Yep. I mean, it definitely, drops 6 to 8 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, it's and
There's all my bees. Yep.
well, every time that happens, I think of one of Jim's lectures where he says, "Yeah, the only hive that swarms is a healthy hive." Okay, so you keep your bees just moderately healthy so they swarm.
Back to the relative humidity. I know. So it took me a long time. It took me, I don't know, maybe close to 10 years between Colorado and moving from Colorado here to Washington State before I started keeping bees again, because I was concerned about how wet it is in Pacific Northwest. And so that's one of for me personally, the exciting things about the setup is I want to monitor the humidity through the winter, because it does nothing but rain from November through January. Then we might get a week of snow or something like that. But just monitoring that humidity within the hive I think will be really interesting this coming year.
And that's a really good point. One of the most intriguing parts about this whole project has been that we're shipping these devices all over the world. And I mean, if you look at the Bee Counted map, you'll find them in Australia or, and Florida or, Canada. You have all these different scenarios that people are raising bees in that as a regional beekeeper, you don't really think about. And it's been fun because, up in the northwest there, that's what people worry about is humidity. They're not worried about overwintering, cold. They're worried about, it's wet. Mm-hmm. In Florida, it's different cases. In Australia, it's different. Everybody has their own scenarios. So having this regional information is, very different than running a study at a university, where, okay, everything's around Columbus, Ohio. That's great for Columbus, but what about, Tempe, Arizona? So that's been a lot of fun.
I think the some of the most exciting stuff from a scientific standpoint is having access to this information and starting to work with it to look for all the correlations or similarities or what's causing what, which makes me wonder about Broodminder and the other hive monitoring products that are out there, and in the digital world and the influx of information. Is there talks between all of the manufacturers, vendors, of standardizing on reporting your reporting data, reporting and recording data, so that you can share it across, like say, share it with Hive Tracks or share it with Bee Health Guru, or once you start pulling together all that information, and then you can start crossing it with, I don't know, your weather, with rainfall, with hive sounds, with all of that, beekeeper observations. That would be really, really powerful, I think.
Jeff, can I jump in here, because you're getting a half a horse ahead of the cart here. Let me go back to, how are you collecting that data? Is there an app on my phone? Is it in the cloud? How am I recording it? How am I saving it? The fundamental, because that's where your question is going, Jeff.
Yeah.
It's being saved, it's being used someplace, and then take it from there and use it with other people's data and information. But for yours, how does that work?
Okay, so I'll talk through the
good, yeah,
through it a little bit here, and because fundamentally this is just a data logger, right? It's saying, okay, let's keep this data, and then let's get it somewhere. So the devices are keeping the data. And the devices keep it up to a year, and they run on a coin cell. And then you come up with your cell phone, or we also have a cellular hub that will send it up 24/7. But basically, the devices talk Bluetooth to this local receiver that might be your cell phone or our hub. And then once it's there, it sends it to the internet. To get to the internet, there's a couple of different ways. You can go through your cell phone, you can go through Wi-Fi, you can go through all these different ways. And then we have a giant database that Google has graciously helped sponsor with us. And that's where all this data ends up. Now, the issue with all of that is there's about 13 or 14 paths to get all that there. And so we have 12 major software packages to stitch all this together because no beekeeper wants to do it the same way. So,
of course,
people in Australia, their hives are way out where there's no cell connection. People in Boston who have their hives out on Cape Cod want it to go up 24/7. There's a lot of people who don't want to spend more than $29, and so they want to go out with their phone, and whether that's Android or iOS. So it's a surprisingly complex ecosystem for all we're trying to do is get, temperature and weight data. And we don't want anyone to have to worry about that part. So, we've got a group of about 6 people working hard on all this and, basically making it as simple as we can so that people just say, oh, I push this button on my phone, it goes up there, and then I go to beecounted.org and see my data and look at my neighbor's data and look at all this around me.
That's what I want.
Right. Well, and, even the people who aren't using, and, maybe you don't want it and you want to just look at Jim's data all the time. So you say, oh, he shares his anonymous 4-digit code for his hive. And you say, go look here and you can watch his hive. We've got people in Germany who their family back in Minnesota wants to watch. So there's all these things that we also want to promote the communication and the discussion between people. So we don't care that everybody has the devices. We care that everybody is thinking about this stuff and has access to data that may be useful to them.
Well, that brings us then to Jeff's question is, you have developed, what did you say, 13 pathways? And other people, I'm sure, are struggling and have discovered and have discarded and what have you, similar technologies. Do you talk to each other?
We do. And, I can't think of his name right now. The wonderful guy who coordinated a meeting last year at
Jerry?
EAS. No.
Roman Shank.
No. All I can think of is Don Coates. Anyway, we do get together every once in a while at the meetings. We certainly know each other. And
Frank Linton.
Frank Linton, thank you. Yes, Frank organized a meeting, a day-long meeting last year, which was, just delightful. We went out and had drinks the night before, and, it's not as much a competition as just everybody is, everyone's goal is to sort of understand what's going on and come up with solutions that are useful. We are all in this together, and we don't know what we're going to find that's going to, really impact beehive management. That's the goal. It's not just that we have these gadgets, it's that we change things. So it's very early days. We don't have a universal way of going about it. We're talking together and trying to figure out what that was. But, everybody is so busy just trying to keep up with their own problems that we haven't delved into that yet. So the short answer is no, there's not.
Well, I imagine that it's very, it'd be a big undertaking in and of itself. I mean, just as big as any of the products themselves. Just standardizing on the data collection and the format of how that's collected would be a great
we're certainly open to working with everyone on this. Like I said, our data is public domain. Mm-hmm. We decided early on that the information was too valuable to hold it ourselves. So, our our way we get it and all that is proprietary. But once the data is there, it's public domain, and we put it out there. Anyone who goes to becounted.org, there's no login, there's no nothing. You can go and you can click around and see people's data. And we are also working with, a couple of researchers at University of Chicago. I just met a wonderful woman at EAS who's a statistician and gaga over bees and data. And like I said, in France, we're working with that group to really understand and exploit the data. It's great to have this data, but if we're not using it for something, it's just a waste. So that's our big goal.
Well, I can see a lot of ways to use this data that don't apply directly to beekeeping. Also, I mentioned one before is, when are my roses going to bloom? No one growing degree days. So I see a lot of future in the bigger picture. Your little, I'm not going to say little, your piece of the pie is certainly interesting in the way you collect your data. I guess the question is, what are you looking for next?
Well, a couple of things. And like you said, you mentioned Jerry Bromanshank. He had a nice paper a couple of years ago with, bees as biosensors, that you've got these hundreds of thousands. Well, we figured it up that we've monitored about 2 billion bees so far. In fact, I made a McDonald's sign, 2 billion bees monitored and growing. Once you start adding up that, basically 100,000 bees per hive per year and that sort of thing. So what we're super excited about and collecting data, because we don't do anything without data behind it, is a mite counter. Mm. And we will be introducing a mite counter at ABF next January. Once we've proven that it works and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I'm sorry you're not going to have that at APA Monday. I would like to see it. I'd like to see that there. I'll be up there and take a look at all the rest of the things.
To our close friends, we will. To the general public, we're holding it back a little bit. But so we'll have information up there on it. We're collecting data now with Purdue and Ohio State. And we're really excited.
Can you describe a little bit how that works, or is it an optical thing, or is it a sound thing, or is it?
So we have been thinking about this for about 3 years. Actually, I can tell you when I first said we have to do this was when I saw Sammy Ramsey's. I think it was the second time he gave a talk. It was at New Jersey, and Jim too happened to be there too. He keeps coming up. Anyway, watching his presentation, which was about 3 years ago, I guess, and that, mites are on the bellies, and you start thinking, okay, how can we do this? How can we do this in an inexpensive way? And we looked at fluorescence. We looked at a lot of different ways, and basically have ended up with a video approach, and we'll be doing image recognition on them and 24/7. And it's actually sitting here beside me. One of them there's a lot of software that's got to go behind it, but we want to make it something that's useful for normal people, not just scientists. So we're pretty excited about that. It's going to open up a bunch of new avenues, because there's so much we don't know about Varroa. We know about the bugs, but we don't know how it translates and how it infects our hives. And, we talk about mite bombs. Randy's done some nice studies out in California about this. And I know in New York, and Tom Seeley and his group are doing things, but it's hard to monitor mite growth. And so if we can do that 24/7 and get an estimate and see how that growth occurs, and is it, like an event that starts this going, or is it, just they materialize out of nowhere? I feel that that's a huge area that we just don't have enough information.
Yeah.
So we're going to, add that into our ecosystem and see where that goes.
I look forward to that. A quick question. I'm looking at your manual that comes when you can download it off the off your webpage, and I certainly recommend that people do, because it's got a lot of good information just on bees. But one of the pictures there is the map and where people are who have brood. Are these people forming Ohio communities or Northeast communities, or is there some way for some groups of people to communicate?
There are groups, especially New Jersey, for some reason, is just a really strong area. I think Tim Schuler has done a lot out there.
Yeah.
And yes. But New Jersey and the East Coast, some clubs have formed together. We would love to have a social part of our software.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's package number 13 and 14. So it's manpower. To do this stuff well, you can't just do it in a weekend. So that's on our roadmap, but there's not a really great group. I wish there was.
I can see the value of that if I'm sitting in Northeast Ohio and I'm the first one to pick up, my hive just swarmed.
Right.
Which means that yours is going to in about 10 minutes.
Right.
I could let you know and get the word out. So I could see the value of people working, if not through you, around you, to make that communication work. And
also, understanding like the nectar flow. If, even as it's coming north, you can say, oh, it's a week earlier than it was last year.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to expect mine a week earlier or a week later, and those sorts of things. And when it ends, because some people have to pull their honey as soon as it ends, or the bees consume it all, and those sorts of things. I will mention that one of the moments that was really significant for myself and Theo Hartman, he's our people's drone. He is the user who makes sure all this stuff works and the quality and all that. But he was invited to talk at a beekeeping meeting in Virginia Beach. And he went there, and before that, I think 5 people had Broodminder systems. And they said, would you come and interpret the data? So about 3 or 4 days before, Theo, went to the website and pulled up the data from these different people in the different hives, and then went and, without asking anything, said what he saw in the hive and sort of told the story. Because, data, you just have to think of it that it's telling a story. And we want to understand what that is. So then he went through these 5 hives and went through basically the whole season of data and was dead on almost everything, that all his observations about different stressors, swarming, robbing, and those sorts of things. And after he left that meeting, he called me, on cloud 9. But it was at that moment that you really realize, okay, if a person can look at this data and accurately read it and say what happened, then you've got something that you can teach a computer these signatures. And in the heat of the moment, not 9 months later, but in the heat of the moment, say, hey, you need to go see your hive because, the temperature was at 95 degrees and now it dropped out of, the brood zone to 89. Something happened. That's what we mostly need, are triggers that say, go look. Because when we get busy and are ignoring our hives, that's where we feel the value is. And one last thing is that when you install a package and it comes up and it's just running at 95 degrees Fahrenheit, super strong, the queen's in there doing her job, and you don't necessarily need to rip the brood chamber apart, to see it and set them back. Just you look for anomalous behavior instead of just searching it out. So my soapbox.
For somebody who sits in a chair that gets a telephone call often, why did my hive die?
Yeah.
I can see the value of that. Well, what's your address? Give me your access to your hive in the last 9 months of data from Broodminder, and I can probably tell you, or I can at least point to a bunch of things you should have done or didn't do that would have helped that situation. I can see every extension person in the country demanding that.
Well, so one of the cases he looked at was really interesting because, the bees were great. This was in Virginia. And, you had a nice, great spring flow. It put on 100 pounds or so, right through the 1st of July when they're going to a dearth. And then, it trailed off. And then in October, the hive died. And the thing Theo saw was that there were no dips in the weight along the way, because when you inspect the hive and sort of pull it apart, it'll catch, that the weight goes down for, an hour. And he said, this hive was never inspected. So he surmised that, okay, Varroa is probably a problem, and that, everything looked great, but it's these other little clues you get along the way that when he said that, the guy said, well, yeah, that's exactly what happened. I ignored it, and they died, and they were loaded with mites and all that.
Yep, like I said, why did my hive die? This would be a tool that would make life a lot simpler for a lot of people. If all right, I'll have to go home and put mine on.
Okay, well, if you have any problems, support@broodminder.com. Mike is there. We know people need help, and so a big part of us is, making sure people are happy.
Oh, quick question. Because I have in my apiary, I have styrofoam hives. I have 8 frame, 10 frame, and 5 frame. Does your equipment work with all of them?
They do. The scale will work with 8 or 10s. It's wide enough and it's thick enough. We've made it, really heavy duty, so that that will work out without a problem. In fact, Theo has all 8 frame hives. And the styrofoam stuff, it's interesting because some people are collecting data. One of the things that a number of people across the country are collecting data to give evidence to their superior overwintering scheme. Right?
Yep.
Whatever their theory is, now, instead of it just being the loudest person in the room, it, put data behind it and show us.
Yeah. Good.
That's great.
Well, that's good to know, because if you're locked into 10 frame only, I'm just going to go, well, I'm sorry, because I have a 10 frame, but I've also got an 8, a 5, and a styrofoam. So
it's harder to do on the sideways hives on the top bar, just because they're organized differently. There's no.
I can see that. Yeah.
We put the sensors above the bars, and the top bar is just basically solid wood.
Yep.
So you can drop it down. The sensors are 1/4 inch thick, so they live in bee space. It's just a little trickier.
This has really been fascinating because it really does tie together everything that I think that it's clearly demonstrates where the future in beekeeping is going. It's more than keeping bees in a rock wall, right, Kim? I mean, we're going from rock wall beekeeping to electronic monitoring of today's beekeeper, and it's from prehistoric to futuristic beekeeping, and it's really fascinating, and it is fun.
Well, and I'll tell you what, our kids, my grandkids, expect this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's far out for us, to use another obsolete term, but I mean, it's new and exciting for us, but they just expect it. My brother's sons are coming into the farming business now, and he started on his 1066. It was high tech because he had air conditioning. And now it's loaded with GPS. It's loaded with instrumentation for one reason only, is that it makes him more money.
Yeah.
But his kids, and the way this has transformed farming, has just changed our life. And we believe, I tell people, Broodminder's a faith-based operation, because we have faith that we're going to find something really significant. We don't know what that is, but the only way you find it is by starting that trek and start going down that path, and make mistakes and say, I should have done this, but then you get to the goal and something really wonderful happens.
I'm waiting. Prep.
Well, Rich, it's been really good having you on the show today. I think Broodminder is a great product if someone wants to sit or work the bees in the afternoon and go back and still thinking about them and want to see how they're doing. You can sit on your couch and actually see it too. So.
And obsess.
Yeah, obsess. Yeah, I mean, it's just for those.
I mean, that's what we like to do sometimes.
Yeah, for those of us who tend to do that, it's a great tool, and it's and educational and informative. It's more than it isn't just a toy. It's not just a weird thing, but it is great information that can be gathered and you can share it. It's fun. It's great.
If it is just a gadget, we're going to stop doing it because we don't have an interest in that. We have an interest in making things better.
Well, I look forward to hearing of future product announcements. The mite counter at ABF next January, and the future that you have rolling out in Broodminder.
Thanks.
I think, Jeff, for all the folks listening, you will have on the webpage all of the information and how to find out more about Broodminder, where and when and how and all of that.
You bet. We'll have all the links to Rich's products and to the beecounter.org and even to the Beekeeping Today podcast apiary in Olympia, Washington, so that they can come out and look at live information.
Okay. All right. Rich, thank you a lot for today. I appreciate your time. And keep us up to date. Something comes up, let us know. We'll get back to you.
I certainly will.
Thanks a lot,
Rich.
Thanks a lot. Right.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that was entertaining, Kim. The electronic. This was a show right up after my own heart. I just loved. I love the data gathering and the geekiness of the electronic beehive.
Geekiness. I think you hit the right word there, Jeff. I look at it a different way. I look at it as being another tool that beekeepers can use to do a better job and collect, like you said, collect the data, make inferences from it, be able to make command management decisions, do a better job, keep their bees alive, make money, all of those things. You like the geek part of it. I like the end run, but boy, I tell you, he was fun to listen to.
Yeah. Well, even though I joke about the geeky side of it, I can really see the balance between wanting to know everything I can about what's going on in my hive. I mean, every beekeeper wants to know that. So these tools give you that ability to peek into it, but it's not an excuse to ignore the hive. It's not an excuse never to look in the hive. It's not an excuse never to manage your hive. I think it just adds more data overused term.
Another good tool.
Yeah, another tools that we can add to our, like you said, or to our management practices, and I think we're living in an exciting time that way.
I think the thing of all of the conversation we had today, the thing to me that was the most enlightening is the discussion we had that one of his people did with those beekeepers in Virginia, where 1,000 miles away and 9 months later, he could tell you why that hive died. Yeah. And that has value beyond measure. When you're trying to be a mentor, or when you're trying to teach somebody, or when you're trying to learn from your own mistakes, I see that as, of all of the things that these tools offer, that to me, I think probably has the greatest value.
Yeah, I agree. And then when you think about how exciting it is, if you could combine this information with, say, Jerry Romenshank's Bee Health Guru, and correlate the sounds with temperature rises or humidity rises or falls or any of that other information that a tool like Broodminder may be gathering, I mean, that's pretty exciting. So,
I like the comment he said about his nephews expecting this kind of technology to be part of their beekeeping. I wish I was 20 and was just starting out again and was able to take off with this rather than wind up with this. But either way, it's fun to watch, and it's exciting.
Well, pretty soon they'll be embedding sensors into individual frames, and they'll be able to tell you how many are in larva in the first 3 days, and how many are eggs, and how many are larvae, and how many are pupa, and how many are about ready to hatch, and how many frames are this way, and then you could divide it up between top box and bottom box, and boy, oh boy, then won't you have fun?
Yep, it'll be fun.
Well, that about wraps it up for this podcast with Rich Morris of Broodminder. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever you download or stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. We also want to thank this week's sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. And while you're there, give them a shout out for sponsoring this great program with Rich Morris. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us your comments and questions at beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else I've missed or want to mention there, Kim?
I think I've got a little bit of overload today, Jeff. I'm going to leave it right there.
Okay. Well, sounds good, Kim. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you next time.
Good. Take care.
Bye-bye.